With 5.7 million people in just the United States who are bipolar, it's amazing how misunderstood it is. Most people have a limited concept of the illness from TV or because they saw it next to Britney Spears' name in a tabloid once. Realistically, unless you've actually lived with or dated someone with bipolar for an extended period of time, it can be really hard to wrap your brain around it. After all, mental illness is a family's best kept secret and shouldn't be talked about. Shh. Well, fortunately, the bipolar cat's out of the bag, and many people like myself are trying to make a difference through educating others. So I'd like to point out some of the most common myths about bipolar disorder, and I strongly encourage you to do your part by sharing videos like this also. So the first bipolar myth is that it's all in our heads. Like we're just looking for some kind of fashionable excuse to justify our moodiness and erratic behavior. So to say it's all in our heads is the ultimate bull, if you know what I mean. Brain scans like MRIs and CTs have shown undeniable differences between a normal healthy brain and someone with bipolar disorder. And if you think it's just something trendy because it's a common social meme and slang term to describe someone's behavior, bipolar disorder has a concise clinical definition and has been documented for over 2,000 years now. So the myth that it's all in our heads, scratch that one off. All right, so myth number 2. Bipolar disorder is just another name for people with mood swings. Oh, don't we wish it was that easy, but it's not. So doctors at Bethesda's National Mental Health Institute have shown that the mood swings of bipolar are much more severe than most people. They're much longer lasting, and most significantly, they interfere with important aspects of a functioning life, like the ability for some of us to even work or successfully attend school, and even not being able to take care of basic responsibilities at home or sometimes personal hygiene. Experts all agree that it's far more intense than someone without bipolar just being bummed out, so to speak, because they had a bad day or something. For us, the same bad day could cause us to be hospitalized for weeks or even end up in jail. It's really that serious. Now on to the third myth, which is that people with bipolar disorder are all creative geniuses. Oh, don't we all wish that was true? And don't get me wrong, those with bipolar can be extremely creative and show signs of incredible brilliance, especially when we harness that powerful manic energy and channel it into something positive or creative. When I experience certain types of mania, I feel like I'm using like 100% of my brain and can accomplish incredible things I never thought possible. But for me, it's usually followed by a foggy, horrific crash where this so-called genius goes right out the window. There's also bipolar people who aren't extra creative or intelligent throughout their cycles, so that stroke of genius stereotype just doesn't hold consistently true. On to myth number 4, and that is those who are bipolar will switch back and forth from mania to depression all the time, or they're ill all the time. Now, although the famous Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde have often become synonymous metaphors for those with bipolar disorder, it doesn't work like that. There can be long periods of time where someone with bipolar can be stable and fully functioning for months even, without any symptoms, especially those who are following a really strict and comprehensive treatment program. So even though there's many different types of the disorder, the overall average of bipolar patients are depressed more often than manic. Some people are ultra rapid cyclers like myself and can switch back and forth more rapidly than others, but bipolar is usually characterized by abnormal mood states enhanced by predominant highs or lows. Abnormal meaning like laughing instead of crying when you just got fired or lost your home. All right, so now the next myth is a big one, and that is that we all feel great and happy when we're manic. Now, for some people, this can be somewhat true, but it's absolutely not the case for others. Sure, I've felt so euphoric and blissful that people thought I was high as a kite, and man, it felt good. But sometimes manic cycles can start out like that, But this is where some of us can cause the most chaos or destruction in our lives. There's these states called mixed states where, sure, I'm manic, but I'm also so depressed that I can't stand living in my own skin. It's an instantly horrible combination, and unfortunately, mixed states are when people feel like absolute hell but have the manic energy to do something about it, and what they do usually isn't very good at all. Like looking for distractions through severe substance abuse, or spending their life savings at a casino, or maxing out credit cards on stuff to fill the void, so to speak. This is also where people get hypersexual and use poor judgment or do risky things that they normally just wouldn't do, like cheating or having unprotected sex. And then there's those who experience mania with total rage or irritability and end up in jail or even worse. And then there's those who just have one panic attack after another or can't sleep for days. So all that being said, mania isn't as charming as the myths might portray. On to bipolar myth number 6. Many people think that recovery from bipolar disorder just isn't possible. So there might be no cure, but there's so many things that we can do to successfully manage our lives. With the right comprehensive care, we can actually live very meaningful, happy, and fulfilling lives. For decades, society believed that bipolar was just completely unrepairable and forever, but modernly the focus has actually switched more towards wellness and management. Comprehensive care means therapy, medications, lifestyle changes like diet specifically, eliminating substance abuse, getting enough sunlight, regular exercise, things like that. It's hard, especially when at first you're so depressed you can't even get out of bed. And on top of that, most people, and not just bipolar, are willing to change anything but themselves. They'll change their hairstyle, their clothes, their relationships, a job, or they'll move somewhere else without even considering just eating a little better or drinking less. Sometimes it takes losing everything or reaching a breaking point where we refuse to keep living like this before we actually change the important stuff. Okay, enough about that one. On to myth number 7 about bipolar disorder, which is manic depression is different from bipolar disorder. They're actually one and the same. Before psychologists pinpointed what we now know today as bipolar disorder, it was just grouped into a general category called manic depression, which really describes the two most notable traits of the illness, the manic side and the depression. But as we know, there's many different types of bipolar disorder, like type 1, type 2, type 3, cyclothymia, hyperthymia, mixed states, rapid cycling, ultra-rapid cycling, and so on and so on. We'll get into the different types in another video, but manic depression is basically an old-school generalized term for all bipolar disorder. And now on to number 8. Once bipolar is under control, we don't need to take medications anymore. Now, wouldn't that be sweet? No more horrible side effects or financially wrecking prices of medications. The whole guessing game with doctors trying to figure out the right ones. It sucks royally. It really does. And unfortunately, because it sucks so much, 90% of people who are bipolar and when they first start taking meds are going to go off of them. And the two biggest reasons are that they feel like they've been cured, which is just the meds actually working in the first place, or the side effects become absolutely unbearable. I can't express to people how hard it was just for me to find the right meds. I mean, we're talking a decade of unending frustration and hospitalizations and even the time it took to even know if a med was working or not. There's such a small number of people in the entire world who can manage their symptoms without any damage to themselves or others without some kind of medication. It's like saying, after taking this insulin, I feel great. My diabetic conditions are gone, so I guess I'm not diabetic anymore and I don't need these shots anymore. It's a tough one. And often some kind of medication or combination is just absolutely key to staying well. On to the 9th myth about bipolar disorder, which is children can't experience bipolar disorder or that people can't be diagnosed until they're 18 or older. It's true that it can be really hard to tell the difference between hormonal changes or actual bipolar symptoms, children as young as 6 years old have been diagnosed by psychologists. Diagnosing a child has to be done really carefully and absolutely by a professional. It's also good to get more than one opinion, because 20 to 30% of people just complaining about depression to their doctors are misdiagnosed when they're actually bipolar. If you're concerned about your kid, do something about it, like right now. It's a progressive disease that gets worse or can do more brain damage the older we get. So early detection is really, really important if possible. All right, we've made it all the way to the end of the list. We are at number 10, and the 10th myth about bipolar disorder is that there's a test for it. Now, this just isn't true. In 2008, there was this supposed at-home test being sold on the internet, and it even made headlines. But the test only tells participants if their genetic makeup places them in a higher risk of having or getting it. This test takes basically saliva samples and looks for a couple of mutations in a gene called GRK3. And that gene is just associated with the disorder, but it can't tell for sure. True diagnosis of bipolar disorder has to be done by a doctor or a psychologist who takes a really careful look at not only the person's history, but tracks their symptoms over time. Goes over family history and so much more. There's a lot to it. Anyways, that is it, my polar warriors. This concludes the list of 10 common myths when it comes to bipolar disorder. There's a lot more of them out there, and I could keep going, but I think I've covered enough bases to help get some well-needed information out there. Let me know what you think about my list in the comments, and please show your support for what I'm doing with this channel by interacting with it. And of course, the ultimate support would be to become a subscriber of Polar Warriors. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to seeing you back here again for another video. Please take care, stay well, and we'll see you soon.